I'll just try and share my screen.
Oh, no worries. And welcome, lower six. Got a fair few. Gary was first. He gets the prize. I've got some others coming, hopefully.
Are you taking the register, Siobhan, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, that'd be great if you did that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm just calling people at the moment, saying, come to the meeting. Fab. Right, I'll leave you guys to it then. I'm going to leave the meeting and go over to the upper six meeting. Perfect. So I'll see you guys later. Thanks very much, Oonagh. Thanks, Denny. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Perfect. Can I just check, is the session ends at 2:45? Is that right?
No, so we've got till 2:30.
30, perfect.
Sorry, 3:30. That's what I'm after.
Oh, sorry, your time. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. We meant the same thing. So.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Am I okay to get going, or did you want to?
Absolutely.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. So my name is Oonagh. I work for a company called InvestIN Education, and we run career experience programs for students aged 12 to 18. Some of you may be familiar with what we do, and I'll touch on it a bit at the end. But today, I'm just going to be working on looking at kind of how we can start bridging that gap between school and the workplace, and looking at particularly skills in terms of CVs and networking. So I'm just going to introduce an app called Slido to you. Just whilst we're doing this virtually, it's nice to be able to make things interactive. So if you could all head on to slido.com on your phones or tablets or laptops, whatever you've got open, and it will ask you for a hashtag, and just use the hashtag Prior Park. And I will just launch the first poll just to get a sense of who we've got here today. So I'm just going to ask, do you know what it is that you'd like to do in your future career? And hopefully that should all be launching now. Just wait for you to access that and get some results in. So again, you just go to slido.com sorry, and then enter the hashtag Prior Park when it asks you. So that should all be nice and clear for you. I'll just wait for some results to go through. Perfect. I can see people are managing to get there, which is great.
Mine didn't work initially, but I clicked on the suggested one underneath, and that worked quite well if you're struggling.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. So I can see we've got some results already coming in, so I'll just show those now. 1 second. Let me just see if I can share that so they come up. Sorry. Perfect. Amazing. So you can see hopefully the results on screen now, and it looks like the majority of you do have some ideas in terms of what you want to do, but not fully sure yet, and that's absolutely fine. That's a really good position to be in. Just even starting to think about these kinds of conversations and these kinds of things in the lower sixth puts you in a really good position in terms of when you are going to be applying for things later on. Perfect. So we'll be using Slido throughout the session, so just get familiar with that, just so I can ask you some questions and get your feedback. So it's great to see that the majority of you have managed to get on there as well. Okay, perfect. So just to kind of recap in terms of your career journey and where you're at as a year group, the kind of main message we want to get across is that your career has actually already started. So those moments that you've started to make those decisions about which GCSEs you want to cover, or potentially, you know, specialising further in terms of A levels, it's going to have a real impact on the kinds of things that you go on to specialise in. And you might look around you and see some of your friends doing different subjects to you, and actually, you know, ultimately you're going to be on quite different paths, and your path can be determined by the subjects and things you choose. And then, you know, the goal for a lot of you might be to go on to university, but there are also other great options as well. There's some great degree apprenticeships out there at the moment that are worth exploring. But ultimately, the kind of end goal is to be in a job or career that you feel you can develop there, you're happy there, and hopefully it gives you a sense of fulfillment as well. But ultimately, this whole journey is going to be shaped by all of the things that you do outside of school, all of your spare time. So that includes any extracurricular activities you do, as well as any work experience that you complete. And when we talk about work experience here, we have quite a broad view of it. So it's more looking at, you know, anything you do to give you those employability skills. So that might be some volunteering, it might be having a part-time job, or maybe, you know, doing some babysitting or even mentoring younger students. So don't worry too much about getting, you know, quite in-depth experience. It's all going to be relevant, even if it's just things like working on a school day or something like that. And then extracurricular activities as well, of course, which we'll come on to. And ultimately, that's why the company that I work for, InvestIN, exists. We exist to bridge that gap between school and try and give students like yourselves kind of a meaningful experience of your career. And hopefully you can then visualize, you know, how skills are put into practice in an industry, and actually gain a better understanding of what employers are looking for. So we really want to help students really become kind of young professionals whilst they're at school. You can actually gain a huge advantage once you leave school. So just out of interest, I'm going to launch another poll just to ask you what jobs or industries you as a group are interested in. And for those of you who said you had no idea what you want to do, don't worry too much. You can put in multiple answers, so just anything that springs to mind, even if that's generally, you know, something within science or maybe something creative. Feel free to put that in. So I'll wait for those results to come through, and then I'll reveal them, and there'll be a nice word cloud with the most popular ones in the middle. I can see some great responses coming through at the moment, so it's really great to see so many of you aware of different industries. Perfect. So whilst they continue to come through, our results on screen now. So as you can see, a nice range of different industries, which is fantastic. And you've got things like business there, finance, but also, you know, something maybe more creative like marketing as well, and with some real niche areas as well with aerospace engineering. I really like those ideas, and it's great that you've actually got a kind of an awareness of the different specialisms within different careers as well. That's fantastic, and you don't see that often with a lot of students your age, so it's really reassuring and encouraging that you've seen that. Fantastic. I love seeing the range of results on there, and it's great that so many of you are able to put in those answers. It's really, really fantastic. Perfect. So for the first part of today's session, we're going to be looking at what a CV is, and you know, that is something that is going to become more important for you as students as you progress through school and beyond. Ultimately, a CV is something that is never just rigid. It's kind of a live document that you update, and for many of you this may be your first exposure to it, but it will be something that becomes quite second nature and familiar to you. So in terms of what a CV is, it's essentially kind of an overview of you professionally. So it's your qualifications, it's your skills and any relevant experience. For students your age, we try to encourage you to keep it one page. If you need to, no longer than 2 pages. But, you know, for people of your kind of where you are in your career journey, really you should be able to fit everything onto one page quite nicely. It's just worth bearing in mind that employers typically spend 7 seconds looking at a CV, which isn't much time, I'm sure you're aware. So you want to make sure it's really clearly laid out, so that it's really captivating and it's easy for them to absorb the information from, rather than, you know, it being quite complicated or quite plain looking, so that actually, you know, there's nothing that stands out to them. It's their first exposure a lot of the time to you as an applicant, so making that first impression is absolutely key. Then in terms of, you know, going in more depth in terms of what should be on it, so obviously you want contact details on there. You want them to be able to know who you are, and if needed, contact you. It's a great idea to kind of link maybe your LinkedIn profile, because then if they're interested, that can have further details on you and they can find out more. If you maybe have other professional platforms, so maybe if you're interested in interior design, you might have, you know, a website to showcase that, or if you're interested in architecture, you might have a portfolio, you can link them. You can always link that up the top, and that means, you know, if they're interested and they want to see more, then they can go elsewhere and find out as well. You want to have a bit of an introduction or kind of a personal pitch, which we'll come on to later, to kind of summarize everything that's on your CV and summarize, you know, who you are and why you might be interested in a position there. And then, you know, the first section is typically on kind of qualifications and academic achievements, especially where you are at in your kind of career journey. That's going to be quite important. An employer will be looking at that typically first, and looking at any relevant qualifications as well. And then work experience becomes a big chunk of it, and that includes any voluntary experience, which employers really value. They love to see what you've been doing in your spare time, what causes are important to you, and seeing if they can, you know, that reveals quite a lot about the person, I think, as well as extracurricular activities and any other interests. There are a lot of research that actually employers find the bottom of a CV quite interesting. Those things about what someone's interested in, what drives them, what their values are, that actually can be quite telling about someone before they employ them. And then you'll want to suggest where they can find references as well. And we would always just advise to say they're available on request, because if you put the details of your referees, then sometimes you wouldn't necessarily know when they get contacted, whereas it's nice to be able to kind of control that conversation. So in terms of what your CV should look like, this is a question that we get asked a lot, and you can find templates online. I'm sure there's, you know, platforms where you can put in all the data and it creates a CV for you. But really the message that we want to express is there's no real one way, there's no template as to how to write a CV. It is a personal thing, so you'll want to make sure it's personal to you, but also the format and the styles that they look for can differ depending on the industry. So creative industries might be looking, I saw someone was interested in marketing. A great way to demonstrate your creativity and your kind of strengths is actually by making that CV stand out. How could you present that so that they're really impressed with your skills in terms of your creativity? Whereas for a more traditional industry like engineering, which I saw on there a lot, they're actually looking for, you know, quite a traditional, professional, tidy looking CV. So just be aware that there's no one formula to write a CV, and the style can vary depending on industry. But regardless of your style or anything like that, you want to make sure that it's professional looking, it's tidy, and there are no errors that they could pull you up on, because that ultimately will not play in your favour. If they can see any errors, then they likely will just sweep your CV to the side. As we said, they have 7 seconds to look at it, so you'll want to make sure that they're not wasting any time picking up on errors, that they're really reading what you've written. You'll want to make sure it's nice and clear. There's headings so they can navigate their way through it. So you're not just got, you know, a list of qualifications, then work experience. You've clearly labelled which one's which, and obviously having it in reverse chronological order so that the most relevant things are coming to them first early on. We've mentioned that it's great to be creative with certain industries, but do be wary that, you know, that's only in specific instances, and be cautious with it as well. Only do it if you definitely know that's what they would be looking for. For example, you know, they might be looking for someone to be creative in a role, but it doesn't necessarily mean they would want that from the CV. So it's a great way to kind of express yourself if you know the job wants it, but, you know, be cautious. And if you're maybe erring on you're not sure, then just stick with that kind of normal strict professional format. But obviously tailor it to the job. You'll kind of want to select which bits of work experience, which skills you want to show, depending on which jobs you're applying for. And for all of them, be careful about sharing personal information. You don't want to include too much information in terms of your gender, your age, and things like that on a CV. And then in terms of saving it, don't just save it as, you know, CV version 10. Make sure it's nice and professional. It's your name, your surname, CV, just so it looks nice and professional. As we said, first impressions are key. And if the first thing they're seeing is a bit of a sloppy kind of title of the CV, they're not going to be too impressed. Okay, so then just in terms of how that looks in practice, there's an example on screen now of kind of how you bring all those things together. So as you can see, at the top, they've included those contact details that we mentioned. They've made sure there are clear headings throughout. The CV goes in reverse chronological order, and overall it's nice and professional, tidy, coherent, and doesn't have any of those errors that you want to look out for. So again, that's just one example of how it could be laid out. As you can see, it's nice and clear. It's clear to see which section's which, and they've actually done what we call, they've listed the skills they gained from their experience, which is what we're going to go on to now. So in terms of what skills employers are looking for, this is something that's thrown out quite a lot in terms of employers are looking for different skills. There's a list of them on screen now, and hopefully by looking at this list, you actually recognise that maybe you have some of these yourself, and it's a really great way to start thinking about where your strengths might lie, what you're interested in, just by looking at all of these skills and thinking about which ones you actually have examples of. So I'm just going to go back to Slido now and ask you another question, just to find out what you think in terms of where you could develop those skills. Where might you develop all of those skills that I just had on screen now? So you've got teamwork, communication, problem solving, attention to detail. There's so many skills, and there's so many places that you might develop them. I just wanted to see what you all thought first before I go through some of my examples. Great, there's some responses coming through already. Perfect. I'll just wait for a couple more to come through and then reveal the results. Great, there's loads coming through now. Perfect. So I'll just show you those. And again, the bigger ones will be kind of appearing bigger on the screen. So yes, definitely in school, and that might be taking leadership roles within school as well. Work experience, which we've already mentioned, voluntary work for sure. Someone's mentioned the InvestIN programs, definitely a great way to develop these skills, same as summer courses. And I love that someone's mentioned playing a team sport for sure. You might even find that during kind of within that team, you actually take on a leadership role. So that's a great way for you to develop those. Yeah, I love all of those suggestions. Thank you so much. So, I mean, you've touched on most of these now, but just to go over kind of some that we have identified. Obviously, school was the biggest answer in the middle of the screen there, and you will definitely be developing these skills in school. So, you know, any group projects, any assignments that you're doing, any essays you're completing, that shows really good time management. You might actually do some volunteering within school. Maybe you're working with a younger student and mentoring them, or have you ever volunteered on a school open day maybe, or done any work for kind of your school newspaper and things like that. So you'll actually find that a lot of these skills, the good news is you're already developing them in kind of day-to-day life just by being in your lessons, by being engaged, and by doing all of the things that your school provide for you. But you'll also be developing these by all of the things that you do outside of school. So that's any work experience that you've gained. So someone mentioned our programs, they count as work experience, any summer courses you do, any part-time jobs or volunteering opportunities in a work capacity count there. But on top of that, this huge list of extracurricular activities where you develop these skills as well, which is fantastic. And actually, it can be really helpful to have a range of them as well, because you know, you'll want to make sure when you're in an interview scenario or where you're in a kind of where you're writing your CV, you're not just talking about one place that you've developed these skills. So you're not always referring to your extended project that you did or your football team you're in, but you're actually able to talk about different resources, different examples from a range of places to show that you've engaged these skills in different platforms as well. So hopefully this is nice and reassuring that you've actually already done a lot of these things. You're already developing these skills, and it's just about really identifying that and putting them into practice. So it can be quite daunting, the idea of building a CV. So we've kind of broken it down into 3 simple steps in terms of a starting point so that you can start thinking about these, and hopefully that will lead on to a CV. So just to start, we would always encourage you to actually just build kind of a mind map or some kind of like thought bubble where you can actually just think about all of your achievements. So that might be your academic achievements, any work experience you've done, any kind of extracurriculars you've completed, and just kind of starting by branching those out and listing them off. So it might be that you've entered an essay competition, or maybe you did a group project in history, or you're part of a football team, or you're in the school band. Just starting by kind of listing them all as your kind of base point. And then from there, maybe take another colour and just draw arrows off all of those things that you've done and identify which of those skills that we mentioned earlier that you've actually developed from doing those accomplishments. So if it's the group project in history, You've obviously developed teamwork. Maybe you actually led the presentation, so you develop communication skills. If you're part of a debating club, you're also doing communication there, presentation. And so that hopefully what that will teach you is that you've actually built a lot of skills that might interlink as well. You might find some patterns that you do lots of things that engage teamwork and communication, but maybe you don't have as much problem solving or creativity. So it will help you identify your strengths and maybe areas for improvement as well. And then once you've got that, you've got your accomplishments, you've got everything that you do and enjoy doing. And then beyond that, you've got your kind of skills you've acquired. Beyond that, you can actually start to draft those sentences that summarize the accomplishments, which will then later form your CV, and making sure you're referencing those skills away as well. So taking that one step further and talking about work, kind of writing about any work experience you've done, you want to highlight the actions that you've taken and the skills that you utilized and developed. Make sure you're using keywords. So a lot of the time, big companies will actually use a computer to scan applications, and too often they actually use that to scan and look for keywords that are in the application form themselves. So if a job has asked for certain skills, they will look for those same skills in your application. So make sure you're mentioning them on the CV, you're mentioning them in any kind of cover letter or application you're writing. Make sure you're nice and specific. Typically, you don't have, much room if you're just sticking to a one-page CV. So you want to make sure every word is relevant and not wasted. And it's using active verbs, so specifying what you did, not just kind of, as generally our team. Actually, you want to say what your role was within that and be specific. And then quantify your actions as well, and think about the result of, how your action led to a certain result. That's a really kind of nice cyclical process for an employer to look at. So this is kind of what we might call a bucket CV, and that's a good place to start, is by just, putting all of that information that you've built up on your mind map onto a piece of paper, making sure it hits those headings. You've got the reverse chronological order as well, and making sure that, everything is on there, every single thing that you might want to mention. And that could be a couple of pages for your bucket CV, because then for each job you apply for, you'll want to have a tailored CV. So that's going to be kind of picking the most relevant parts of what you've written and editing it depending on the job that you're looking for. So, for example, we'll just go through an application and how you might pick out and tailor a CV based on kind of the job requirements in an example. So here we've got a kind of job advert looking for someone who is organised and motivated, looking for a job within software engineering and IT consultancy. And then obviously they've said specifically that they're looking for applicants who are team players, who have the ability to communicate with stakeholders, with sound administrative numeracy and IT skills. So there's a lot they're asking for there. And then if we kind of really highlight those things, this is a great step to get used to doing for any job or any work experience you're applying for, is really learning how to visualize and see the skills that they're looking for, so that you can match up your application kind of hand in hand with that. So we've now seen those kind of key skills they were looking for. So just to talk through how you might incorporate that then into the CV. So this is kind of your bucket CV, or an example of what you could put just at its base. You're a part-time waiter, you serve customers, you support kitchen staff, and you help new staff members. So that's a very kind of limited description of what you might do. But then if we look how to edit that to the application that we just saw, just by adding a couple of, actually really only adding one or two more lines to that, but a lot more in terms of the quality. They've really added that they can balance their studies with working part-time, which shows good time management. And they've picked up on a couple of those key skills that were mentioned, in terms of leadership, multitasking, communication. And even if we look at kind of one line, instead of just helping new staff members, they've been specific about what they mean by helping. They've trained and coordinated new staff members, which is really helpful, because now the employer has a much clearer vision of the skills that they've developed as a result of that placement. Just go through a second one here, in terms of additional skills and interests. The first example, again, just, quite simplistic. So they're captain of the school football team and they've got, OK, IT skills. but actually, you know, that doesn't tell the employer much. It doesn't tell them about what skills they developed or any specific achievements. So again, just by adding a couple of different skills to that, they've actually said, you know, as a team player, they was nominated to be team captain, which is quite important, because it means that actually, you know, people have respected the fact that they want you to be captain, they want you to take a leadership role on. And then within the IT section, they've actually been much more specific about the different kind of programs they're aware of and the ones that they're actually well versed in, which is much more helpful for an employer. Anyone can say they've got proficient IT skills, but being specific in Java and Python, understanding the difference between Microsoft and Google Docs, and actually having a website to work independently on, they're huge things that the first example, just they wouldn't have taught anything to the employer. So hopefully you can see that by kind of just drawing out a bit of detail into those examples, it goes a long way in showing the employer what skills that the student has. So we mentioned there, you know, the requirements and how those two students have met that criteria as well, which hopefully was helpful in terms of understanding a bit more about how you might tailor your CV to be skill specific. So the second kind of topic we're going to touch on after looking at skills and CVs is the idea of networking. And it follows on quite nicely, I think, from the idea of a CV, because a CV is a great place to start in terms of reflecting on who you are and where you're at in your career journey. But increasingly, we're seeing the importance of having networking or professional interactions with professionals in the career that you're interested in for multiple different reasons. So I'm just going to ask you all as a group, have you ever had a conversation with a professional about their job or your career? And this could be a professional in any field. And I'll just put that up on Slido and wait for some responses whilst we get those through. Perfect. It looks like a lot of you have, which is fantastic. Let me just show those results on screen. So 70% of you have actually had a conversation with a professional about their job or your career, which is really great. That's a really strong statistic. Those of you who said maybe you're not sure if you have, because you might not know, you know, if you've specifically spoken about your career. Those of you that said no, that's absolutely fine. Hopefully after today, you will have some kind of key skills that you can then go away and use in order to have those conversations. But this question really is just to reassure you that if you've had a kind of conversation with a professional about their career or your career, that actually is a networking encounter. So for those of you, those 73% who have, or 67, that you actually have networked with a professional, which is fantastic, and a great starting point for today's session as well. So, you know, we've seen how work experience is crucial to advance your career, and hopefully, you know, those work experience, those extracurriculars, they can often lead to additional opportunities as well. And networking sometimes is mistaken as the idea that you'll only really progress in a career or industry if you know someone who's already well established in it. But we just want to stress that that's definitely not the case. That's not how we see it. We see networking as actually the importance of building relationships with a variety of contacts over the course of your career, where you can actually connect with different people to exchange information, advice, and career guidance. That's a great way for you to gain exposure in an industry. And, you know, why should you network? I think as students, it's often quite an intimidating prospect, but I want to reassure you that, you know, even those small conversations can have such an impact. So it's a great way to learn more about your chosen career from industry experts. It can actually open up opportunities. We see this time and time again, that building a pipeline of contacts is really helpful to helping you achieve your career ambitions. Only 40% of jobs are actually advertised now. That just shows how much can happen just from these small conversations as well. And we saw that over the pandemic. There was a lot of people that actually managed to secure job placements as a result of LinkedIn and just people sharing their posts with their network saying that this person was well skilled in an area, but they were currently looking for jobs and then managed to get another job as a result of that. And hopefully over the course of a whole career, these kind of connections, this network will really pay off, because it's not just that, you know, you might meet someone one day and then the next they might get you a job and then a work experience and then that can lead to a job. It might be that you meet someone and have a conversation now whilst you're at school, and then maybe you keep in contact with them whilst you go on to further study, or maybe your first couple of jobs. But then in a couple of years, maybe 5-10 years, you reach back out and they see that they're working at your absolute dream firm. And then that pays off in that moment, because they can actually help you get an in much later on. So it's really about just starting now to build these relationships that longer term can pay off as well. And then, you know, ultimately it might be that you're really successful and you want to give back as well. And I think that's a key lesson, is that most of the time professionals are really happy to give you up their time and help you, because they've been in that position as well. So maybe one day that will be you who's offering your advice. And like I said, networking can at times be quite intimidating. It can be scary as a student to figure out how you might network. So we're just going to go through kind of 4 different stages in terms of how you might network. So firstly, it's important to identify who you might want to network with and who the right people would be to network with. And they might be someone who works in an industry that interests you, or maybe they've got certain expertise. So they might be a recruiter or a careers advisor, and they might be a great person to have a conversation with. Then secondly, it will be about targeting that opportunity to actually ask them questions and have a conversation and get to know them. And they can appear in a variety of forms. They might be just kind of short conversations over the phone, maybe virtual insight days, higher education fairs, which are obviously taking place online at the moment, work experience opportunities, or even online opportunities as well. You obviously want to approach them and make a great first impression, and then finally maintain that relationship effectively. Make sure you're doing your research, you're preparing, you're not wasting that opportunity, and you're practicing what we call an elevator pitch. So before I put an elevator pitch or personal pitch on screen, I'm just going to ask what you might include in a personal pitch. So I'll just go back onto Slido and ask, you might not have heard of an elevator pitch before or a personal pitch, but just take a guess about what you think you might include in it. Just wait for some answers to come in. There's no real wrong answer here. It's just out of interest what it might be that you might include in a personal pitch. And there's been some clues throughout the session and some things that we've covered. So would encourage you to just think about what you might include in a personal pitch with a someone of interest, a professional to network with. Perfect. Let me have a look. Great, some really great responses. Let me just show those on screen now. Perfect. So skills, interests, hobbies, definitely. Things you like doing, personal ambitions, that's a really fantastic thing to put, definitely, because you want to think long term. You want to show them where you want to get to, not just where you are now. I love that someone's put something I want them to remember about me, because that's a really key thing. You want to make sure you leave a good impression, you make an imprint for that person so that they will help you later on, and experience in team, certainly, you know, where you've actually developed these skills. So thank you so much. I know that's probably the most difficult question I've thrown out, but those responses were absolutely spot on. So here we go. Your elevator pitch is essentially a very brief introduction of yourself that you will make to a new contact or a professional, if you're in a situation where you want to approach them and ask them some questions. So having a really clear and coherent elevator pitch is an excellent way to make an impact and to get the professional's attention. It's about really giving them kind of that context as to who you are, what your skills and ambitions are, and also specifying what it is exactly that you'd like to find out. So I like the idea that it's the ambitions as well. That's something that someone said. It's, you know, where you want to get to. You need to explain to them your ambitions. And you should always prepare an elevator pitch if you're going into a real life networking scenario or a phone call. But also, it's typically the first question you'll be asked in an interview is just, okay, so tell me a bit about yourself. So if you've got something ready to go, 30 seconds, just a couple of sentences, you're going to start that networking interaction or that interview with a really strong start. You'll feel nice and confident because you would have prepared it, and it will just make you kind of subconsciously feel more at ease during that interaction. But you also will write it at some point. You'll have it in a written format. It will appear maybe in those opening sentences in your CV or on your LinkedIn, and you also should have it in a written context, just in case you are emailing it. It's probably more apt now that you might be emailing someone in a networking situation. It still counts, but it's just worth bearing in mind that you would have a written format as well. Perfect. So going on to how this actually looks then. So if you're preparing an elevator pitch, a great place to start is just by determining who it is that you'll be speaking to. So we'll think about the kinds of different people that we might be speaking to. So you could be speaking to a professional who, you know, is in that job and you think can help you out because they've got that experience in that job. It could be a recruiter, and they've obviously got experience in speaking to people about those industries and they know what employers look for. Or it could be a recent graduate, so someone who's actually recently gone along the path that you're about to go on to as well. So they're going to have really relevant kind of recent experience as well. You might want to ask them what they would have done differently maybe if they were to redo their kind of career path and go back to where you are right now. So I'll just put up kind of some different questions that you might want to ask these different people. And it's just worth bearing in mind that you'll have, similarly to how you have a bucket CV, you'll have almost like a bucket personal pitch, which will be the similar on a similar vein, but the kind of questions, the ask to that person will be slightly different depending on who you're speaking to. So we'll just kind of transfer those questions into some examples then. You'll obviously, once you've figured out who it is you're speaking to, you'll put together the elevator pitch, tailoring it depending on who you're speaking to. So if you're speaking to a recent graduate, for example, you'll be saying, for this example, the student's name is Caitlin. They're an A-level student and they really enjoy studying Spanish. They understand that the kind of recent graduate they're speaking to studied languages at the University of Manchester, and they're wondering how they found the course and what they hope to do with their degree. But then if you're approaching the recruiter, your approach might be slightly different. You can see it's been similar in terms of their opening, but they've said, I understand you recruit for global tech companies, and I was wondering whether linguistic or numerical skills are more desirable in that industry. And as you can see with both of these examples, they've actually said, I understand that, you know, you're in this position. So they've done a bit of research and a bit of preparation in terms of who they're going to be speaking to. And then finally, with the professional, they've asked them, you know, I understand you work for an advertising firm and would like to find a bit more out about your summer internship scheme. So, you know, a lot of the time people think networking is just going up to someone and saying, oh, hi, I'm interested in engineering. Can you get me some work experience or can you get me a job? But as you can see from these three examples, for none of them we're asking that, but each of them is kind of equally valuable in their own right. And that final one, finding out a bit more about a summer internship scheme, well, actually, they'll probably give you a lot of tips in terms of the application. So you'll learn more through that than simply just by asking for work experience as well. And, you know, obviously, this isn't an exact science. You can add your own twist to this. I love that someone put as an example something that they'll remember you about. And actually, by including kind of a bit of a fun fact or something that you're interested in, maybe something quite amazing that you've done, if you've recently completed a challenge maybe, or you've entered an essay competition that you're proud of, that's something worth mentioning because it can make them remember you as well, which I really like that idea. So this is kind of a task that I would encourage you to do later on today or later on this week, and just start thinking about, you know, how you might speak about yourself in this way, because it can be quite intimidating as a student to think about, you know, what you might say, how you might speak about yourself in this way. But you'll want to just practice that, because the more you practice it, the more natural it will feel as well. And this links quite well to the CV task that I mentioned earlier, with that kind of initial mind map of what you've done and all of your kind of accomplishments, and then using another colour to talk about the skills you've developed as a result, because they'll probably feed into your personal pitch as well. So please do, if you get a chance, have a go at this activity. Maybe practice it with your family or with your friends, and, you know, see what kinds of things people are saying in their personal pitch. It can be quite interesting to think about the different things that people pick up on. Okay, great. So say you've had loads of great networking interactions and you've got a fantastic professional network. Ultimately, it's very important that when you make these connections and you meet different people, that you don't just forget about them. So you want to make sure that you're keeping a log of kind of any of the information and advice you've gained, and you've set yourself new goals as a result of it. A really fantastic piece of advice is that once you finish speaking with someone, you should actually always ask them, who do you think that I can speak to next? Do you know anyone else that I can speak to help me on my career journey? And don't be shy asking for direction about your next steps. Just being honest and saying, I definitely know I'm interested in this career, but I'm finding it quite difficult to know what to do next. Do you have any advice on what I can be doing so that when I come to apply, I'm in a really good position? And finally, obviously, a good way of kind of sticking in people's minds and being memorable, as one of you said earlier, is by having kind of a social networking radar, having them on your social networking radar. LinkedIn is a fantastic way of that once you are old enough to develop a LinkedIn account, and used appropriately and correctly can lead to great opportunities in terms of your career. And that's something that we hear time and time again, is how many people have actually managed to secure jobs off the back of kind of LinkedIn and networking as well. So I know we've kind of covered a lot in terms of CVs and skills and networking, but hopefully you should be able to see that it all really feeds into each other. And ultimately, by kind of making a couple of steps on this journey, you really can help yourself in the longer term. So even if the only thing you do after this session is just start by keeping an active list of all the skills you're developing, or maybe doing that mind map, which one day will become your CV or personal pitch, that's going to be really helpful by the time you come to apply for jobs. So another thing someone mentioned earlier are our programs, and these are available if you want to come and get some kind of more experience of your career, if you want to have a taste of what these careers entail. Now you're going to be experts at how to network with professionals, so you can come along and network with our professionals on our programs. We run programs in the 20 industries that are on screen now. They're 1 or 2 days online at the moment, which is great. You can access work experience from the comfort of your own home, and you can obviously, if you wish, also in the summer we do longer programs. We're doing 5-day online programs, or if you are traveling over the summer, we're going to be holding them kind of in person in London, held at UCL as well. Obviously, we're very aware that a lot of people haven't been able to get work experience this year, and a lot of work experience opportunities were cancelled. So we are running kind of these in-person work experience opportunities so that students can get that kind of in-person experience. And there's some of the benefits on screen now in terms of gaining a head start, making sure that you're actually able to talk about yourself confidently on your CV, on your UCAS applications, experiencing those kind of iconic places in London, as well as gaining those private networking opportunities so that you can really speak to professionals about their job and potentially lead to further opportunities later down the line. And there's just some photos on screen of our internships last year. So top left, we've got some students learning how to take blood from a prosthetic arm on a young doctor internship. Top right are engineers visiting a private collection of supercars. And bottom left, students taking apart an engine under the supervision of a top automotive engineer. And then bottom right is our law internship, students actually outside the Supreme Court. So hopefully, obviously, that gave you a bit of a flavour of the kinds of things you can do. The full information and timetables are on our website. And really, like I said, it's that kind of one-stop shop to learn more about your career. And I'm pretty sure all of the careers that you all mentioned earlier, we were able to offer a programme in. So it will be fantastic if you've not already attended a programme to see more of you on our programmes in the next kind of term or so. If anyone has any questions at this point, I'm aware I've finished slightly early. There was a lot of information to get through, so I'm happy to take any questions now, or for the programme specific stuff, the information is all on our website.
You were obviously very thorough.
If the students think of anything afterwards, then I can always answer it at a later date or via email or something like that.
Are you happy for us to share your email?
Yeah, well, I think Miss Manson has it as well, so she can.
Okay, guys, last chance. Anyone got any questions they would like immediately answered? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. It's really appreciated. Yeah, we're really lucky to still be able to put things on like this, even though we can't all be in the same room. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you so much.
That's all right. So guys, you are welcome to exit the classroom after saying thank you, please. And if you have any further questions, let me or Miss Mason know and we can put you in contact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.